So it's connecting right now.
Okay.
And then.
So let me do this. Then I can adjust that. Yeah. Can you snap a picture of me on your phone? Oh, I forgot.
Oh, I said, yeah, definitely get those behind the scene photos for sure.
Yeah.
Those are important with all your lights.
Yeah.
But I'd like to welcome everyone to our Grownup Navajo presentation with Jaclyn. This is her second time presenting with us. Today we're going to be doing a blue corn mush demonstration. And on Wednesday, we did have a presentation on Kinalda and the importance of it, and also Jaclyn's experience. You know, it was really just a incredible presentation. For March, this will be our last workshop for the month with Jaclyn. Next month, we'll be giving out more information for our April workshops with Jaclyn, and it'll be, you know, a workshop, and then the second will be a demo hands-on. So we'll be sure to give out all that information, so the next time you're able to be with us, you're able to cook on your end or do any kind of demonstration that Jaclyn's going to be walking us through. So I'm really thankful for Jaclyn's time again today. Also, as well, I'm very excited that this is going to be our first YouTube live streamed video. So we know that it is a little bit difficult, maybe registering or logging in, and there's that extra step, but to ensure that we have good security and that we are creating a safe space for our presenters and our participants, we do have to have that extra step of registering. And now we're able to do a live stream so that it's easier access for everyone as well. So we'll be sharing the link with everyone after this event, but definitely go on to Indigenous Lifeway's YouTube page, and that's where all our videos will be held. And just to introduce myself, my name is Crystal Curley. I'm the director of a nonprofit called Indigenous Lifeways, and my clans are Kinya'ani Nishle, Kitlachini Bashichin, Nakaidene Dashiche, Arohanagatni Dashinale. And I'm from Chicholta, New Mexico, about 30 miles south of Gallup. And I'm so thankful for today again to be, you know, all of us in McKinley County right now are wrapping up our spring break. So to be able to be in this space this week and, you know, doing our presentations, Indigenous Lifeways has been busy this week. But yeah, thank you again for your time. Again, Jaclyn and everyone joining us today, but I'll let you take it away, Jaclyn. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I am so grateful for, let me make sure both my screens are on. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be joining you all. Jaclyn Roessel Yinshye, Techi Nishle, Kiani Bashishin, Torakoja Idashache do Berlagane Dashanella, Lukajukai do Sanakana de Nasha. Shimato Shuja a Karina Del Monte Russell Willia. And I'm connecting from the lands of the Tamayama people, or in English, known as the Pueblo of Santa Ana. That's where my partner lives. It's where we make home and where we raise our two beautiful children, who you'll probably hear at some point during this demonstration. I am just so humbled and excited and nervous to be providing this demonstration. This isn't something I've ever done before. But I am president of Grownup Navajo. It's a business that actually grew out of a blog that I started writing about 10 years ago, and or nearly 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in October. And I created the blog really as an expression of grief And I think that's really important to name in this process. I was grieving the unexpected loss of my Nalasa. And it was a way for me to ground in her teachings. It was a way for me to ground in not just the hurt and the grappling that I was dealing with, but also with trying to find strength, trying to remember the ways that I could keep growing even without her. For those that have had a significant loss, especially when it's one of our elders, I think there's a sense of like, how are we going to keep learning? You know, how am I going to keep navigating, learning my culture? And at the time, I was nearly, you know, I'm 39, so it's like what, 29 almost at the time. And I was really experiencing this sense of like, well, there's all these milestones that she won't be here for, or things I haven't learned. I used to carry a notebook with me that would have all my questions. And so, you know, once I was done with my assignments or done with work, like I was able to like call her and I would have all these questions for her and I would ask them and just kind of go through the list. And she would, you know, just share with me different stories and teachings. And that's how I learned, like when I was away from home, going to school at Arizona State. And I, through my blog, found, I think, a couple of key learnings. I understood that like she had taught me, and all the women in my life had taught me so much about being a Diné a Navajo woman. And that, as we talked about in the presentation earlier this week, I shared about the significance of the Kinalda ceremony and the way that that instilled in me really such a seed of like strength. It is something I tap into consistently. Like I can, part of my meditation practice and like grounding practice is like remembering the people in the Hogan on that like last night, and remembering them coming together and like praying like for my life, but also for like our people, our community, like our families, right? And so that's what gives me strength. And one of the things that I learned in starting Grownup Navajo was that I could also challenge myself to learn and like, you know, actually like teach myself how to do things, that it wasn't dependent upon other people just, you know, waiting for other people to like give me the lessons, that I could seek information and that I could look for information and I could also practice things. And so one of the things that I've taught myself and like have practiced is like how to make tushchin, what I'll be showing you today, how to make blue corn mush. And I was really nervous when the invitation to give the talk and then the demo. And I thought, well, I'm not a chef. And there's so many like incredible like native chefs, and my sister-in-law is just an incredible, like went to culinary school, has this training, like runs her business, and like has experience doing like professional demos. And so I was experiencing this bit of like imposter syndrome of like, oh my God, like who am I to do it? And at the same time, I also think it's important for us to be brave, right? To be brave and to say like, I am going to try to do this, right? One of my favorite stories of my late Nellie lady was this moment in the Kinalda ceremony of one of my cousins. And she was trying to remember, I don't recall if she was dressing them or she was setting things up. And her sisters in the Nepasad got after her and kind of scolded her. And I remember her saying back in Navajo and then saying it in English, like, well, I don't remember. Kinaldas don't happen every day. And she like laughed, right? And it was just this like admission of like somebody who was like definitely like our elder, like my like beloved elder, like in this place of still learning. And I hold that with me so much as a reminder that even our elders like have to ground and like remind themselves like, okay, like what comes next? Or like, how do we do this? But they also learn from each other. And that's what I am inspired by. That's the motivation I'm holding today, is just that experience of like, I can do this. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is really important is like to recognize that like blue corn is something that's really important. And this experience of like having Tushjin as part of our practice is something that's really significant in like what we do and how we work together. And one of the things that, hold on, that was exciting. our neighbor came by. I forgot to hang the "we're recording" sign on the door. So, blue cornmeal is a meal of significance. It is a meal that is sacred and important. We harvest corn as part of our livelihood, and we can look at the different practices that we have in our ceremonies, in our prayers and songs. We talk, well, maybe not a lot, but we talked, and I think are all familiar with like the hajonjet, the blessing way ceremony. And corn, whether it's cornmeal or corn pollen that we pray with, like corn is important and corn is sacred. And blue corn is, we have different colors that we use for different things. And blue corn is something that I learned recently is a meal that, when we have, particularly when we have hatathlis or medicine people come to visit us, that this is a meal that we can make and prepare for them as part of the feeding that we do for them, because it's blessed, right? Like there's a responsibility that and a commitment that we've made to corn as an entity, to that, in that we will continue to harvest it, we will continue to plant it, we will hold those seeds as something that we are responsible for continuing to grow, because so many of our practices depend on it, right? And today that's harder. It's harder for us to plant. Many of us live in cities. Many of us live away from our home. Many of us have challenges in accessing our own land, right? And so I think that, it's important to name, but also to recognize that there can be challenges, and that's okay. That I name it to not place guilt or like inspire those feelings like in that, but like to say that we can hold it as important. When we're making it, we can be intentional about it. So the other thing that I'll name too is like I shared earlier in the week, like our practice of Sa'ana Gaibak Ehosho, which is really this epistemology, our entire way of knowing, like as a people, of how to be in life with other living beings, and that we are intentional, that this is fundamental to our way of knowing as Diné people. And that in that intentionality, we approach things from the 4 phases of thinking, planning, implementing, and then reflecting, right? Like, and all of those things are really significant and important. So Twishteen is a meal that we prepare often. And also there are places like, we can go to the flea market, we can go to different fairs. There are people who prepare it as part of their offerings to our community, like through their business, through creating their own livelihoods. So I know that I was thinking about this in preparation for this. There's this one meme that I saw at some point of like, whoever made it was like joking about the use of like measuring cups and like things like that, and this person was like, I'm just guided by the ancestors. And I think that that's like absolutely beautiful. And also, if you need measuring cups, like then use measuring cups. I find them useful. I'm going to be using them because I think it's helpful when we're learning how to do something, to kind of have an actual like sense of like, okay, this is how much water to start with. So I have that to kind of review like what you might need if you're following along with this. A saucepan, and just a small one works. Like you're not making a whole bunch. This is really like 1 to 2 servings. Well, it can kind of come out to like 3 cups or so. And that varies too. When I kind of start with an intention about how much I want to make, and then can like build upon that and grow it. So you'll need a saucepan. You can get water, cold water. And right now it's, like wintertime beginning to be springtime. Tomorrow is the spring equinox. And like our groundwater is nice and cold. So just, getting that level of cold, it doesn't have to be like ice cold water or nothing like that. But that having cold water is helpful. I have a big measuring cup because I tend to sometimes like splash and get messy. And right now there's a cup of water in here. All right. And one of my good friends, Tate, gifted me this whole kit, but in it was juniper ash. And so this is from Blue Corn Custom Designs. So I'll hold it up here. Let's see. Yeah. So Blue Corn Custom Designs, they have juniper ash that they've prepared. And this is about, you can purchase about 6 tablespoons, and they have different batches that they prepare, and then smaller batches. So if you're looking, and they have a store available on Etsy. Like if you don't have ready access to like blue cornmeal, which we'll talk about in a little bit, Blue Corn Customs, like those little gift packs that you can purchase too. A whisk is really handy if you have stirring sticks. My stirring sticks are super long and are not comfortable for me to use on a stovetop. I'm actually need to get a smaller pair. I'm sure some of you watching that have like smaller ones that are perfect for like just being able to mix. That's a goal that I have, of like just remembering to make some and prepare some. So yeah, whisk is really helpful because this helps like keep the cornmeal from getting lumpy. So a whisk or stirring sticks are really helpful. A spoon, just if that's just to have. And then I have like a 1/4 cup measuring cup. And you won't need more than, today we are going to use about a 3/4 cup to start with. So you won't need more than like a cup for this recipe, but it's good to have 2 cups on standby of like blue cornmeal. I have 2 different kinds of cornmeal. So this one's from Navajo Pride. So this is Navajo grown blue corn and harvested blue corn. It's roasted cornmeal. And so I think that's one thing to pay attention to, like when you're purchasing cornmeal. Not all cornmeal, like in a store, there are also like health stores that have blue cornmeal, but you just want to make sure that it's roasted before you make this, because we want it to be cooked cornmeal prior to that. To roast cornmeal, you can use like a iron skillet. That's not a part of my demo, but you would warm the cornmeal and you can see the slight shift in color. You would then cool it off before using like in the cornmeal process. So it's that would be a 2-part process, but just be aware of like what you have. And so I have 2 different kinds of cornmeal. Here in our home community, we have a blue cornmeal mill. And so I have some unpackaged like roasted cornmeal in this jar. When you purchase cornmeal, in either case, like this one, I actually need to move to like an airtight container. Once you open that, it really helps longevity or keeping it from becoming stale. Of course, like keeping as again, as we're moving into springtime and like summer critters are out and so forth. So like being able to have something that's airtight and like not something that can be eaten at by bugs will help keep your materials like fresher and like bug free, because we all want bug free food too, right? So those are the materials that were on the list, and so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So for starters, we have a cup in the saucepan. I'm gonna lower this a little bit. I think. Let's see. There we go. All right. Okay. So we want this to come to a boil. As we're waiting for this to boil, what I'm going to do is put about 3/4 cup of blue corn into the big measuring cup that I have here. And this is, again, just to like help you visualize like about how much you need. So I'm not being perfect about the scooping of this. So it's actually probably a little bit less than. And then another scoop. So this is 3/4 cup of cornmeal. And then you're going to mix it. So we're just mixing it all up together. And what's helpful, what I learned in this process, a tip that I had read, or maybe I watched somebody do a demo too, but one of the things that was shared was that it is cold water helps the cornmeal bind to the water, to the cornmeal. So like it helps it distribute. And so it's helpful to use cold water in what you're mixing in. And maybe that's a bowl, like whatever your tools you have. So we're waiting for this to boil. What you can do now, once that is kind of mixed up, and what I had forgotten almost, and I'm going to put about 3 pinches of this juniper ash like into the mix. For those that know, so again, 3 pinches. There are some people who put more. So actually, maybe I'll do 4. Depending again, like on how much you have, right? So this is a really very fast, like way of like making it. So I'm gonna mix it all together. One of the things that I learned, I come from like a background in museums, and this particular meal is something that's shared across like many different communities in the Southwest. Like corn is like definitely part of our sustenance and livelihood. And there are many different corn dishes that are shared amongst like tribes. And I think that one of the things that in a study I had read, what's really amazing about blue cornmeal is that it actually is like in a complete diet. The nutrients that the corn provides, but also that by putting the ash in, it actually provides calcium. And along with, I think fiber and something else, like the ability for all of I guess the corn provides the fiber, but the idea is that, our ancestors knew and like know like how to sustain like ourselves, right? And so I think that's something that I carry with me too. So this is boiling. We're going to dump this in, and you'll see that like this on the bottom, this is normal. Like it kind of gets stuck on the bottom. The cornmeal sinks, right? Cause it's like heavier. You want to just like mix it all in. And what I'm going to do is, if you're, working like in your kitchen, you can just get some extra water, and I have some here on the side. So as this is boiling, we're going to turn it down because it can get really hot and start to cook really fast. I really try when I make this to be intentional about how I do it. And by that, I mean kind of following those teachings of like the but also just like the teaching of like and to be in appreciation and like gratitude for like the ability to be able to continue to make this dish, like to feed my family, is something I'm always grateful for. And I will tend to make this like at lunchtime, like for us, when I'm in those places, because I write, I also work as a cultural justice like advocate and consultant. And in those moments when I'm feeling stuck, where I'm just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do next, or especially in the pandemic, there were moments I a year ago gave via home birth. We brought like and welcomed like our daughter into the world. But there are many times like birthing in the pandemic that, and I'm sure we've all experienced them, where you're just down. The feelings of like isolation, of sadness, of worry come in. And I'm going to put a little bit more in here because you can see it kind of it thickens. And so having extra water on hand is helpful, and really mixing it it's really important. I'll come back to my story in a second. Stirring it to the consistency that you like. And so this is, I guess, too, an important thing to name is that depending on like your family, you have an understanding of like texture, that like the way your mom made it, right? Like the way your grandma like makes tushchin. And so I tend to make, so if there's a spectrum of like kind of really like runny, like more watery to like lumpy, right? Like if that's the spectrum, you have to think about like, okay, like what is my preference? What do I like? And I really love like when there are lumps. My partner does not like that, but I like the lumpiness and clumpiness. And I love it when like tushchin, like the last bit of the pot sits out on the stove and then gets kind of crusty. And so then it has like the different texture. Like I'm like, I can snack and eat blue corn mush like all day long. And so you have to think about like what your preference is. That said, you want a consistency that is like not so thick. And sometimes it's hard to like determine that with a whisk, which is why it's helpful to have a spoon. So you can see a good indication for me is like, okay, like that's maybe a little bit like thicker than I want. And you can see what's starting to happen is it's bubbling up. And so you got to be careful when it does that, because of course, like it's really hot, it can burn you. So making sure you're stirring it is helpful. And so this kind of gives you like the texture. You see that, you know, so the ability for you to think about like, how do I like my tushchin? How do I want to eat it? And like, who am I making it for? You know, and so I might just put just a little bit more and mix it in. So you can see like when I added more, it's still kind of separated. So we are gonna like just again continue to whisk it up. You can kind of scrape, you know, the bottoms and the sides and so forth, making sure that you are getting it distributed. And I'll check one more time, but I think we're almost there. I think one of the things that I've kind of learned is that once it starts to do what it was doing before, where it's like kind of like doing that bubbling and like popping up, even if it's just a little bit, like it's really hot, like it is what's the word, it's binding together in a really good way, then you can turn it off. So I think that we're at a good place. Like this looks good to me. And so when I look back at like, okay, like how much water did I use? So there was a cup in the pot, there was a cup in this, right? And then I had about 2/3 cup of water, like in this extra bit. And so you can kind of figure out like, okay, that was about 2/3 cup of water for a little bit over half, you know, of the cornmeal that I used. And then like a few, like 4 pinches like of the juniper ash. And so, you know, just kind of just understanding like, okay, and that made, you know, 3 bowls or 1 big bowl if you're me. It's up to you how much you want to eat. And so now it's ready, and I can show you a little bit more of the texture. So put that there. And so here is what it looks like. So it's kind of, you know, it's a little bit like soupy, but you can't, like if you hold, like, because the light's there, like it's a little bit like translucent, like you can see that like coming through too. And I think that you know, you can let it cool for a little bit and then, you know, serve it. There are, you know, ways that you can eat this that I tend to like not eat or add like any sugar to it. It's very rare that like I'll put like a sugar in it. One of the treats that we do, like with my kids and families, we have some maple sugar that we purchase from people up, indigenous people who harvest it like up in the Great Lakes area. And that's like a really good like natural sweetener. And you don't need that much of it. A good friend of mine, Tina Archuleta, who's from the Pueblo of Jemez, what I was sharing before, a year ago, we welcomed our daughter via home birth. And so we had our doula, Tina. She came both before, during, and after our daughter's birth. And one of the things that she made was blue corn mush for us. But she would add things like a little bit of oat milk. So it was all plant-based, because like she is a plant-based, she has a business that's actually all plant-based, like Pueblo inspired food, which is really incredible. And she would put in a bowl like a little bit of sesame seeds, because of course, like after birth, your body's so depleted, like it just needs to like recharge. And so we put a little bit of sesame seeds, a little bit of like that maple sugar in it, oat milk, and a little bit of vanilla. And it was like it like completely changed my mind about like having twistine that's like sweeter, and it was so tasty. So you can play with it. I've been to a program in Crown Point at NTU at Navajo Technical University, and like their culinary students catered the event, and they put in berries, right? And then there's also that really cool eatery in Farmington, Juniper, which is they have like an amazing like bowl of twistine that has like, it's the fancy bowl, so it has like the pepita, so like the pumpkin seeds, a little bit of like fruit, and then a little bit of honey like in it. And so you can make it and like add to it, right? And I think that there are so many things that really make it like can make it special, but also like just playing, like it's always like such a treat. And like what I was sharing before about the intentionality is like during the pandemic is kind of when I started to like really want to like perfect this. Like I was really like, it was a way for me to meditate. It was a way for me to like think. Anytime I make this, like before I start, and like before we started this broadcast, like I was just like connecting with like my late grandmas, and just like asking them like for support, like please let this go well, please like help me know that this is gonna nourish like my family and like nourish like my belly, and treating it like the gift that it is, like because it is a meal that is still sacred to us, it's still important to us, right? And so I think that approaching it from that place of like and of being like grateful that we're able to continue to enjoy this is really important, and is something that I'm really thankful that like I've learned, and I hope that others are inspired to teach themselves to be in that same place of like learning and experimenting with like the amount of water and so forth. And one thing, I guess another tip I should say, is once the water starts boiling and I put the cornmeal in, I then put the setting, especially if you're using like a gas stove, I turn it down. So it's just like simmering. It's a low heat, and that keeps it from getting too hot or like boiling up like too fast. And I think sometimes when it's too hot or you don't reduce the heat, it can start to actually cook and burn it. But that's also when you get the bad kind of like clumpy, where it becomes really like stiff and hard. So reducing the heat is like really, I think a good tip to like maneuver. Yeah, so I'm super grateful. I hope that people enjoy. My favorite thing is actually when this starts to happen, where there's the top layer that like gets a little stiff, and I like to take a spoon and like skim it off and like eat that, because again, I like the crunchy part, like a little bit of grit. But this is, yeah, it's been such a joy being able to prepare this for all of you, and I hope that folks feel nourished if you do make this, or have somebody make it for you that knows how to make it, and maybe take notes and ask questions. Um, those I think are really special, and that we need to continue to engage in, like having conversations with each other. And yeah, Shahet, so much. Thank you for this invitation, Crystal, and the Indigenous Lifeways like team. And I'm so excited to get to share how I make tushteen with y'all of you.